issue, I don't know if the word is correct, on Casabella, by, you know, the...
I know the magazine, yeah.
From Peter Eisenman.
Yeah.
He said nowadays, by the constant aid of PC, and computer design, and program, there is a constant research of forms, okay? But he said that all this constant is not really a research, and there is a big component of accidental component. He said that if you ask someone who draw or design something with a particular form, it's hardly to tell that there is a deep comprehension of what has been done on the form. He said that there is a kind of casuality over forms, and all this will not last in the future, maybe. So I would like to. I worked with Fuchsas, and now there are lots of production of forms. You know?
Yes, as there is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I would like just to know what is your personal point of view on forms, you know, and what can last of this particular.
When you say what can last
last
in the sense of what?
You know, if someone get in touch with forms, okay, particular, very complex form, but can percepire, I don't know how to say. Perceive, you know, perceive. What really can be understood in such an experience? For example, I don't know, Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, or Zadi glass architecture. What can be perceived?
What can remain?
What can remain in construction?
Well, perceived and remain is different. I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, what really remains? I mean, does any architecture last? I don't think it should. I mean, things mean something only for a particular time. I mean, I don't understand the architecture of the past. I don't really want to. I can't. I can only understand it in terms of now. So when you say last, I mean, nothing lasts. I mean, I don't think things should last. Things should change all the time. And I don't think, I mean, the last thing we want is an eternal architecture. I don't believe in anything universal.
Really?
I don't want anything universal. If there's something universal, then there's no change. If there's no change, I don't see any reason to be alive. So I don't care what the change is. That doesn't mean that all change is bad. But I think architecture has to be about constantly change. The problem with architecture is that it takes too long to build, and by the time architecture is art, everybody tries to preserve as if it's for all time. That's ridiculous. The thing about architecture is that it recognizes time, and it changes with the time, and it recognizes that 7 years from now, what is built now might not be useful. It might even have a different purpose, so it has to be changed, it has to be renovated. So for me, coming from another field, coming from art, to me the great thing about architecture is that architecture recognizes time, and art doesn't recognize time. I mean, I hate art. That's why I left art.
Really? You hate art?
Yeah. I mean, art is something that just stands still. Art is something in which the viewer is here, the art is there, and the viewer contemplates. I want things that people use. So therefore, you know, I was wrong for art. I mean, not that I'm going to keep other people away from art, but art isn't about use. Architecture and design is about inhabitation, being in the middle of, using, having things in your hands, and to me that's the only thing that matters.
The moment in which
well, not just the moment, but that you don't learn things by studying. You don't learn things by meditating. You learn things by being in the middle of something. You might not be able to phrase the learning, and that's why, to go back to your question about form, I mean, you know, I think for us form is the least important thing, yet at the same time we spend an amazing amount of time trying out different forms, because I mean, what's important to us is, you know, some overall structure. I mean, what's important to us in architecture is how do we make something, how do we make a kind of space where people maybe can do something they haven't done outside of that space?
Okay.
How can we make a space that people can start to feel, wow, you can, space isn't necessarily as fixed as we thought. Space is something that we can twist, we can turn upside down, we can turn inside out. But in order to do that, we need, I mean, all that is an abstract principle. But in a world that's a palpable, tangible world, abstract principles are fine, but they are only essays. So in order to make a space, you need some kind of forms. But these forms are, I mean, what we want to do is try out as many forms as possible and to see. And I kind of disagree with what you said before, that yes, I think now the computer has allowed people to make forms so complex that I don't know if it's really true what you say, that architecture is tangible. You can go through, is tangible. You're in the middle of it, you feel it. Seeing is, to me, the least important part about architecture. But that might be a bias I have. I have a bias in favor of a close-up space. A space you're in the middle, a space that you're feeling out each part of it. A panorama space, which is more of a visual space, is probably important too. I don't think I know how to deal with that as well. I think I deal with the kind of space I deal with because I was born in New York. Because New York is a city where you don't necessarily see buildings. I remember the first time I was in Chicago in the 70s, I realized, wow, you can see buildings in Chicago. Whereas in New York, you feel them. You're in the middle. In order to see a building in Manhattan, you have to go to Brooklyn. Yeah, but so New York is a city that seems to be constantly in close-up.
Yeah.
The thing that I like about that kind of space is when you see something from afar, you can judge something. You can contemplate it, you can judge it, and you can evaluate it. When you're in the middle of something, you don't have time. You don't have the luxury to see it from afar. You have to take each incident as it comes. And to me, that's a scarier space, but also maybe it's a space that you never feel like you can understand, whereas as in a panorama, you can always understand. And I don't know if that kind of understanding is as good as the step-by-step understanding. You have to make do. You have to make do in a close-up space. Ideally, that's the kind of space I would love our stuff to have. The kind of space I'm describing is far better than any projects we've done. But that's our goal.
And do you think there is some places that have reached this kind of, nowadays, this kind of perception you spoke about?
You mean just
in general?
Architecture in general?
Yeah, in general, just on your own experience.
In some ways, I think the Foreign Office Architects Yokohama Terminal.
Yeah.
Kind of close to that. I think it kind of. In some ways, I think that's a great space. I don't know. It might have ruined things for them because I think they kind of burned out afterwards.
Yeah.
But maybe they can come back. I don't know. But I think that's a place where there's so many spaces you see in magazines and not real.
Yeah.
I would love to go through the UN Studio Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah.
Mercedes-Benz. I've never been to Mercedes-Benz.
No, I think it's BMW. BMW. Yeah.
But I have, I've only seen it in the book. And this is maybe a different kind of space, but the Rem Koolhaas Student Center at the Mies van der Rohe School in
Educatorium in
Chicago.
I thought Educatorium in Utrecht.
No, I was there. Have I been there? But he did a student center in the Nice campus on the IT.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Really
kind of tunnel, yeah?
It's kind of tunnel. It's a real combination of having the outside pathways of the school meet the inside, and I think it was done, I think, like a lot of stuff, certainly our stuff, is done sort of so cheaply that it's starting to fall apart, but that's a big problem with architecture.
Another question is about, on your previous experience as a poet. There is a connection between the construction of poetry, your personal construction of poetry, and your personal idea in constructing architecture.
In retrospect.
Se hai bisogno possiamo riprendere anche con quella, se non hai abbastanza spazio.
Vabbè, poi vediamo. Adesso ancora.
Just because your English is very clear, so I don't need to write down much.
Good.
I can understand everything. It's very good English.
Obviously when I was writing, I had no idea that the work later would become architecture, would become design. But when I was writing, what was most important to me was this space of a page in front of me. So when I started writing, it was always like, how do I move? How do I move from top of the page to bottom? What makes me move from left margin to right margin? So I was thinking of, I probably wanted words to do something they couldn't really do. I wanted them to be material. I wanted, that's why I would use, I would start a poem, let me just see if I can explain. I started to think that a poem doesn't make sense if it uses words that refer to a space off the page. I can't use a word like cup, a word like camera, because this is another space. So I have to deal with the space of the page. So I could only use words like here, there, then, words that refer to my act of writing the page, your act of reading the page, or I would start a poem with a period and then talk about the period. I have made my point. So the whole poem begins with it's almost like scripting in computer. I know some people in the studio have said the way I was using poetry is the way they use computer scripting. that you don't have a final result in mind. You don't know what that final result is going to be, but you start a method. And what are some good examples? I find particularly, well, like a poem where each line becomes a page. This is page one, so you go. I don't know if some of the
I can imagine it's kind of dealing with space from a piece of paper, trying to get through, to move in a wider space.
The last poem I did, I think, I read it. The last, and what convinced me that maybe I couldn't be writing anymore, was a poem that consisted of a page from a book on reading speed. How to improve reading speed. And the title given was the time taken for me to walk from such and such a block, 7th Avenue to 6th Avenue. So it was an attempt to make reading time equivalent to walking time. So when I did that, I started to think, this took me out to the city, it took me out to the streets. So that's when I thought I couldn't write anymore. That's when the stuff became art. And for me, why art at that time? Because at that time, at the end of the 60s, was probably a really interesting time in art because everything was being questioned. at the end of the 60s, the most important thing was probably, at least in the United States, but elsewhere too, I think, was the Vietnam War and demonstrations against the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
It was the time when it really seemed to believe it. But at the same time, it seemed to be a time when people could be instrumental. People could take power into their own hands. It's probably good that a revolution didn't happen, because once a revolution happens, then there has to be another revolution to topple the people who won the last revolution. Yeah. But it was a time when, you know, and the interesting thing about art then was that, and I think a lot of this came from the questioning of American power in the Vietnam War. At least for people in my generation, we grew up at a time when America was kind of triumphant. You know, America had saved Europe. America had saved everybody. Then a few years later, we realized, wow, you know, we're criminals. You know, so it was a really important thing, I think, for people in my generation, and so that you didn't want to believe anything anymore. You know, you weren't going to believe this. You weren't going to believe a kind of governmental propaganda. You weren't going to believe anything. It was the time of first feminist writings, so that, you know, there was a questioning of any kind of authority, whether it was the United States, the male, you know, and at that time, I think people were starting to think, what does art consist of? And it was one of the only times where it seemed like art didn't have any specific characteristics of its own, except for the fact that it was called art. So art was a field into which you could import from other fields, from psychology, from sociology. It was an attempt, I mean, a desperate attempt, and probably could never really work. But a lot of us who were doing art then wanted art to be like real time, like real life activity. You know? And I don't know if that could ever work. But it was a time when, you know, the late 60s and early 70s was a time when there was such concentration on person. A common language of the 60s was finding oneself, as if the self is this almost precious jewel that you contemplate. So in a time like that, I think the stuff I did and some other people did, what else can we do? It was a time where there was so much concentration on self that, of course, I was using my own personal pieces. I mean, the way I think of the work I did and the work of many, many, many other people did at that time was very similar to what was going on in music at the time. Neil Young, Van Morrison. It was, you know, usually a male voice. It was about a single person, and songs were very long, 7-minute songs, because you needed time to kind of drift, to discover the self. But you know, times change, and by the mid-70s, I realized that kind of music meant nothing to me anymore. The kind of music that meant something to me in the mid-70s was the Ramones, the Sex Pistols. Very different. Not so much single voice, no more long song. Now, 2-minute song, because a scream can't last for so long. You know, then by the time I heard the Sex Pistols, then now Neil Young seemed to me like country music. It was like this wasn't the city. But at that same time, there was the city. When the Velvet Underground appeared, the Velvet Underground introduced the city.
Of course.
And suddenly it was like you were in the middle of this. But music has always been a really important thing to me. And I think music and architecture are the same thing.
Because even of the time. So you're speaking of music and time, because
well, first of all, it's an easy way, and music is an easy way to try to figure out your time. You can never figure out your time. You figure out your time after the decade is over. You know, the 60s seem so clear. Probably not in the 60s. Probably in 1971. Then you can, in retrospect, say what the 60s were. But music is like the soundtrack of the time.
Yeah.
Speaking like that, you make me think about what you said before about the being inside and be from perspective, you know, being.
And music, the great thing about music is you're inside. I mean, as soon as you hear music, it's inside you. There's no separation inside.
So time is very important.
And also, I mean, the great thing, I mean, to me, architecture and music are very similar in that they both make a surrounding. They both make an ambience. You know, I mean, architecture is, I mean, you're always an architect.
Yeah.
You know, most of the time, you know, I mean, and the great thing about architecture is that even though people don't realize they know it, everybody knows architecture. Because everybody is always in the middle of it. Maybe they know architecture because they've been oppressed by architecture. The doorway has been too narrow. The ceiling has been too low. But the interesting thing is that you learn architecture by going through it. You learn architecture with the movement of your body through space. And the other great thing, and the other connection between music and architecture, is that obviously we're in the middle of architecture now, but we're doing something else. When you're listening to music, you can do something else. When you're looking at art, you can't do something else. The great thing about music and architecture, I think now, and why maybe it's really important for the 21st century, is that it's about paying attention to more than one thing at once. And I think multi-attention is, I mean, I realize, yes, I still buy a lot of books. I don't read as much as I used to. But I have them. But I don't know if I need to read from beginning to end so much. It seems like for me now, it's more important to have a range of things than depth. Even it's you know, I still love movies, but I can't. It's not so interesting to me to go to a space and sit down and watch a movie for 2 hours. If I could watch a movie while I was walking in the street and something else was happening at the same time, I would be much more involved with it.
They are trying to do that. To bring movies on the mobile or to
I've never tried. Have you used? I've never used. I've never.
I saw another couple of questions. The first one is about dimensions. Okay? You're living with different scales. And nowadays architecture seems to lead with big dimensions. Deal. As if the bigger it is, the nicer
I don't believe that. I mean, we think, I mean, maybe again, you know, maybe I have the luxury to think this way because I came from outside, you know. I didn't come from architecture.
I mean, there's a lot
So for me, I mean, we think of, I mean, yes, we want to do architecture, we want to do design too. We want to do clothing as much as we want to do a building. We want to do a glass as much, we want to do a cup as much as...
So you don't think that dimension is a richness?
I mean, I think first of all, you can have, an individual person can have more relation with the cup than with the building. I think you need both of that. I would love us to be able to do both.
It says we are bringing something from the past about dimension, you know. I'm speaking about some very, to me, unusual buildings, like, for example, I don't want to offend anybody, but for example, when I went to see the Paul Klee Museum from Renzo Piano.
Which museum?
Paul Klee, the painter from Switzerland.
And
it's very big, very impressive, you know. But the collection is just a small part of the entire building, as if to say, "Wow, we got this big building surrounding." You got impressed not because you like it, but just because it's much more bigger than you are, and so you got in touch. And I think it was lots of people, and me either maybe, tend to love it just because it's very big. And this is something we brought from the past. I mean, we live in Rome, okay? It's a very still city, and then we will go back to this particular focus. And it seems to us that, you know, dimension, not quality itself, but just dimension, like a kind of brutal force, a vulgar display of power.
I mean, dimension, I admit, is a big problem for me. It's a big problem for me, like, you know, and, you know, yes, I've been through Rome, not the way you have. I've never lived there, and at the same time that there are things I love. I really don't like spaces that make people feel small.
Yeah.
And I think, so many, and they're kind of great spaces, big atrium spaces, and of course they're very grand, but they're like religion.
Yeah, of course.
And you feel inferior. You feel, And I say, and I think, maybe it's not that you have to get rid of the atrium, but maybe there should be a way for people to go up. Make a spiraling ramp around it so people can go up and not just say that up is distant and I can never reach the up. I want buildings that people can reach something and not feel like it's always far away. It's always something that they're not strong enough to get to. They're inferior. I would want an architecture where people feel more capacity than they did before. Again, I don't think we've done that, but we want to do that.
Yeah. But you're always lead with in a very fascinating way with dimension. Yeah, I love the project in Graz.
Yeah.
It's very, it's very, I don't know how to say, it's very, just I don't want to say only, but it's very good, it's very awesome, but it's,
calibrated.
Balanced.
Yeah.
Balanced, can you say balanced?
Yeah.
Yes, it's just, it's a space, but in the middle of a river, but it's a...
I mean, we hoped there was a space where,
we got even a friendly alien in Graz.
Yeah.
But it's... That is the opposite, It's something like a world.
Yeah.
So you got these two personal experience in Graz. One that is, to me, is balanced, and the other one that is too big, maybe.
Now I hope that wasn't only because we had less money to work with. I hope that we don't get, if we ever get more money, I hope we don't get spoiled because. But I think something can. You're kind of part of it, that you're not. I mean, maybe that's impossible. I'm not sure. I mean, what we wanted to do in Graz is that we hoped that people would be in the middle of this space where something outside becomes something inside, and they almost don't notice. So there's this kind of fluidness from a bowl to a dome, and when I noticed, I noticed people. They seem to kind of get what's happening because they walk through and they seem to laugh. They seem to grin, and suddenly the space has changed. But they understand the change because they sit, because they've been through it. It's not something that's been imposed on them. I hope, but again, I don't know how people experience it.
Yeah.
You can only sometimes, especially because I speak very, very little German, so that.
To you, it's important to know how people experience your personal creation.
It's important to know because.
But not in the beginning, maybe after. I don't know.
When you say not in the beginning.
When you start to create,
but there's no people yet. We can only imagine people.
Yeah, but I know. But it's not the target for you. It's not the target. The feeling that they will get.
Well, it's more a set of feelings. We certainly don't want people to get one feeling. We hope that it's an impetus to something, but I don't think we want to determine what people feel.
It's a very free point of view.
But that's why when you brought up before the urge at this time among other people towards complexity, I don't think complexity is just about form. I think complexity is like it's like the making of a labyrinth.
Yes.
But a labyrinth is you have to feel your way through. You have to find your way through. That you don't understand the space immediately. You can understand it almost moment by moment, and I think that can be a liberating space.
Yeah. Okay. Just another question, and was do you think? Yeah. Many things come to my mind while we were speaking. The last one is Do you think that, thanks so much, do you think that this particular kind of line, okay, between art and architecture, which is something very, very common. People always use not in general, but used to talk about art, architecture, which is a lot of...
Do you think there is such a continuity? Maybe because I come from one into the other. I think there's a really big difference.
Yeah.
Like, I think sculpture has nothing to do with architecture, and architecture has nothing to do with sculpture.
But if you listen to, it's very hard, okay, because...
That's why I keep stressing, I think architecture has a lot to do with music. I'm not sure if it has a lot to do with art.
Really?
Because Richard Serra, for example, has made statements about how when sculpture becomes usable, it's no longer art. I think he's right.
He's right.
I think he's definitely right.
Yeah.
And that's why I think architecture is so much more important than art, because it has a number of things at once.
But it's bringing a lot of inspiration from art, and art is not bringing inspiration from architecture, I think. I think that this is maybe a starting point. Architecture is not anymore the leading art, as it was meant to be in the past.
Yeah.
I think. Architecture look at art continuously. Even at you, I see a lot of projects that seems to me that refer to what you have done in the past. But I don't see an opposite, stream of creation. So maybe architecture is not anymore the leading art as it used to be in the past. And it's trying to regain a place in the world by sometimes copying at the past, like musicians do nowadays, to go back to music and to art. So it's,
I don't know. I'm not sure what I mean, I know that I feel like I pay more attention to architecture than to other arts. And I do think that, I don't know, to me it seems like this is, maybe it's only potential, because, but this is potentially a really exciting time in architecture. I think there are a lot of architects, in their 40s. I mean, I realize the architects I pay more attention to are architects that are 20, 25 years younger than me. And the architects I pay attention to are some people I mentioned before, foreign office architects. So again, I think something's happened recently. I do pay attention to, like, Greg Lynn. Yeah. I pay attention to UN Studio, though sometimes I have some doubts, and I don't know how to phrase it. Because I think they start something, but I don't know if it.
What about Fuchs's?
To me, that's too grand. I don't know. It seems too much. It seems too much. To me, it almost makes a point of being bigger than people. Right? It was just at the Biennale. I have no idea what his piece at the Biennale.
To be in?
Biennale.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry.
I don't know. To me, it just seemed big. And I didn't know what the big by itself isn't so interesting.
It's not
but
quality.
Maybe I've never given it enough. I haven't been in that many festivals.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen a lot of pictures. I've seen a picture of architecture, so there's some misleading.
Yeah. Well,
but at the same time, I mean, I'm not necessarily against picture in architecture. I think it's a very, on the one hand, a very unimportant thing, yet everything needs some kind of sign. Because why would somebody use something unless it had some kind of advertisement for itself? Yeah. And in some ways, the image of architecture is kind of an advertisement. Yeah. Like a movie poster maybe you wouldn't see the movie unless the poster brought you in. So it's not necessarily so bad, but it's not the architecture. It's almost something else.
It's all about the time you were speaking before. You're walking on the street, you got this picture of the movie, you got to see the movie. You're all of a sudden, piece of a song, you want to know who's the singer.
Sure.
Okay. The last question.
Yeah.
And now we're done. It's about...
Sorry that today was so...
No, don't worry. It has been very enlightening. Can I say enlightening to me speaking with you? And do you think there could be something it's very hard to me to try to ask you to tell something to Italian, not only architects, but people who's trying to do something in Italy. I don't know what kind. You came from an Italian family, but this is not that important. What I would try to say, you're a New Yorker, okay? And we always tend to look at what happened overseas, okay?
Sure.
I think that very rarely happens the opposite, but you look at what happens in Italy. So can you just give a little bit of we have been very, very I don't know how to say, bombed by information, stuff, everything here.
I think in some ways I'm a kind of bad judge because I grew up with an Italian family that glorified Italy so much. Everything was about Italy that I wanted to run away from it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But they always looked to Italy. That everything in Italy was better.
What I would like to ask you is just a suggestion, maybe a quotation to say. If you say, not general, but you have sold to so many things till now. And I will try to put them down on the paper just so it can be read.
Yeah, try. I would love to see it.
Yeah, I will try. It has been all very clear to me now, and I will spend time, getting all what you told to us. But just if you, maybe there's some kind of advice. I don't think that. I think that advice just like, hey, have a look at what is going on. Because I think we are going sometimes we are bound from images, stuff, newspapers and magazines of architecture, art, everything, and we are building layer on layer and seems like nothing less in the end. This is, sorry if I express myself, but just I would try, even for myself, to get focus on something that I can deal with, I can work. You told before that you are dealing with different kind of feelings on what you do.
I don't know, I think the way I've always, obviously when you work on different projects, maybe there are different things, but I think one thing that always comes back, and I think a lot of people would say the same thing. I can imagine that even like a scientist would say this, that whatever you're dealing with, you start with thinking, what if? What if this was upside down? What if it was inside out? In other words, instead of taking something for granted, this is the convention, what if we didn't? What if I turned this cup upside down? Okay, the coffee would fall out, but maybe now there would be something to do with it that I couldn't have done with it. Or what if I made a slit in it? I think what if, and I'm sure I know scientists think that way. The only way things are discovered is there's this, and they say, well, what if it was that? And you're always trying out. You never know if you can't know at the beginning if this is going to lead to something. But I think it's the only way is to just constantly do the opposite of what it is. If it's closed, open it. If it's open it, close it. If it's I don't know, that seems the most important. And at the same time, I think the important thing is, and this might come from my having but you can be committed to something, but not believe. Believe is you always have. There always has to be a way out.
Perfect. That's it. So thank you so much. It's been very enlightening to me. I do appreciate it very much.
No, I mean,
I will write down everything.
Yeah, I'd love to see.
And I will send you in English, of course. And
if you can. We have one Italian speaker.
Okay. Really?
He's not from Italy, he's from Portugal, but his girlfriend is Italian and he speaks Italian all the time.
You don't speak Italian, no?
I grew up. I grew up at a time when I grew up in the 40s. America had won the war, Italy had lost. It might have been as simple as that, but also, because my father, we lived in an apartment building in the Bronx. My father, mother, and I lived in one apartment. My grandmother and grandfather across
in the front.
And I was so much in the middle of this that I wanted to
escape.
But I wished I hadn't totally, because I wished I had learned the language. It would have been so easy.
Yeah.
It would have been so easy to learn a second language that was as natural to me as the first. And that was a really bad missed opportunity. But I couldn't think that way then. I just wanted to, I wanted to be an American kid.
Yeah.
I never was exactly American.
Okay. Thank you.
So thank you so much. And